Peace, love, and light, fam. This is Jarain coming at you. Big shout out to the folks at Omo House who have been staying in touch and sharing just how much they appreciate the work that's happening in this community. So thank you. It moves me to my heart. Anyway, as you know, we have been working with an amazing curriculum called FaithWorks. And every month I try something different. So the first 2 months did the recording early in the month. And this month I actually decided to do it at the end of the month. And that can simply be because I was working the curriculum for myself and really had a lot of freedom around just my beingness. And so it was pretty awesome to be living into the question of what does it mean to be a people of freedom. So I did notice in terms of statistics, people seem to, at least from the numbers, interact with the curriculum a little less. And I don't know if it's because the recordings entice you and make you go, yeah, I want to check this out a little bit more. So that was informative. But you know, I'm of the mindset, what's for you is for you. So it seemed to be about 20-something folks who seemed to engage heavily. And the ones that did seem to get a lot out of it. So that's pretty awesome. So as I've elected to do, I'm using the verbiage of the curriculum, and then if I feel like freestyling, if you will, I may add my own 2 cents, but I think it's a really good curriculum, so I tend to just share it. So this month, for those of you who checked out some of the links early on, you know, was filled with great music, filled with wonderful quotes, and a real challenge to look at how we relate to this idea or ideal of freedom. So I hope those of you who spent time with it got value. And for those of you who said, oh, I missed that, feel free to scroll down the Cyber Lounge page and you will find, you know, the assignments, the links, etc., etc. So let's begin at the beginning. Wonderful quote that started this month's work by a person that I had never heard of, Christine Walters Paintner. And the piece is from a poem that she's entitled Following an Ancient Call. And I think it's a really great grounding in the idea of freedom. What if we could listen like the great salmon who goes about its ordinary life when suddenly something shifts? It does not come as a thunderous revelation, but a quiet knowing you have been preparing all your life to trust. The path lived until now no longer satisfies, but the path ahead seems thousands of miles long. And your womb is heavy. And I really, really like the poem because I think what it implied to me is that freedom is something that is born within us. There is, you know, like this metaphor of the salmon, that there's sort of a placement within us, something organic, where if we're paying attention, we sort of know. We know something is changing, something is shifting. And it's not, you know, like a big to-do, no big explosion. It's sort of like a quiet, still knowing. And if we can trust our gut, we know that, as a pastor friend of mine says, you know, we were born for this. And so it's beautiful. And this idea that the womb is heavy is, you know, being pregnant with the possibility of freedom, like that is within us. And so I sort of love this idea of a womb that is heavy, ready, ripened. So, yeah, good stuff. So here's the text. Who of us doesn't understand this call of the heavy womb? Who of us hasn't felt a quiet knowing grow inside our bellies until suddenly it causes everything to shift? Who of us hasn't been called by this holy knowing to an entirely new path? And who of us hasn't at some point turned our backs on that call? Not that we wanted to, it's just that we felt stuck. Circumstances, responsibilities, constraints, fear, and self-doubt made that path ahead seem too long, too hard, impossibly out of reach. In the end, we felt trapped, forced to say no when our heart wanted to say yes. And I'm going to pause here because I think when I was reading this early in the month, it definitely struck a chord in me because I know that for years I felt myself being stirred in a particular direction, but it was inconsistent with what I believed at the time. Like I had spent all this money on law school and, I knew that I liked my life looking a particular way. And I had this story about, well, what does it mean to be a spiritual leader? And what does it mean to try to share my vision of Christ consciousness to the world? Would I fit in? Would I be odd? I was integrating all of these different paths. And so often, for a couple of years, it seemed hard. It was out of reach. It felt like, no, I've got to stay this course. Although deep in my heart, I did want to say yes. So I definitely can relate to this. Back on the text. More often than not, this is the true dilemma when it comes to freedom. It's not so much about running away from something as it is about wanting to run towards something, but not being able to do so. In other words, there is a big difference between freedom from and freedom to. Let me say that again. In other words, there is a big difference between freedom from and freedom to. Author Harriet Rubin puts it this way. Freedom is actually a bigger game than power. Power is about what you can control. Freedom is about what you can unleash. Oh my God, I love that line, right? Power is about what you can control. Freedom is about what you can unleash. Indeed, the spiritually devastating piece about feeling trapped is not the cage itself, but the way that cage cuts us off from what's on the other side. And I'm sort of kind of in the text, but not. But I think one of the things that I could see in my own life is when we sort of stay in this place of unfreedom, the hardest part about being not free is all the opportunities that we miss that exist in the space of freedom. And I think that's sort of what the text is highlighting is, we know when we have locked ourselves in this prison. We know, like we feel it. We feel trapped. We feel locked in. And the truth is, there's part of us that knows that if we could get out of that cage, like all this magic exists on the other side of it, right? So we're not really focusing on, how horrible is the cage or the prison, but there's something in us that knows, I'm sure that if I could get out of this cage, that there really is something there. Anyway, back to the text. The progressive Christian faith actually understands it. At its best, and that's talking about progressive Christianity, it never simply asks us, what do you need to get away from? Nope, that's not what it's about. It's about pushing us to ask the deeper question of, what is it that you want to run toward? So get it. Like, that's the key, right? It's not about centering ourselves in a faith that says, what do you need to get away from? What are you trying to improve? What's not working in your life? It's really asking us, what is it that we want to experience? What are we running toward? What are we desiring to engage with? Mature spiritual freedom is never about the absence of all constraints. It's about being able to commit yourself to what you truly want to commit to. It's about constraints of our own choosing. Bottom line, for religious progressives, the drama and story of freedom is not one of spiritual escape, but spiritual pursuit. And I mean, the reason I kind of slowed down is because I was like marinating on that. And I think when I look at certain forms of faith, that's what becomes apparent, like what's missing for a lot of paths. It's as if people are caught up in this drama and they're trying to escape the flesh. They're trying to escape depression. They're trying to escape their sexuality, all of this escapism, as opposed to engaging in a faith path that actually gives one the freedom to pursue, to experience, to have. So anyway, back to the text. Never is this more clear in March. And I love what this text does, is then tries to illustrate what it is that it's been up to, right? This month, not just in the Christian religion, but all the powers that be seem to collude to clear the constraints that numb and imprison us. So spring clears the snow and the mud and places a budding flower in the distance. The equinox eliminates the dark's advantage over the light, making the brightness of a new day more clearly in view. Women's History Month comes along and reminds us that the fight for equality was never simply driven by anger at the glass ceiling, but instead by a love and hunger for what lay on the other side. And then, of course, there's Lent for Christian folk, which at its best is never just about penance or purification, but ultimately about pursuing that quiet knowing and holy path that Walter's Paintner rightly lifts up. So, some folks give up chocolate, vodka, Facebook, Netflix, and it's not to punish themselves, but to clear the view. It's not about withholding pleasure or resisting temptation. It's about clearing a space for remembering. It's about quieting the swirl and the voices of the world around us so we are once again free to hear that divine voice within. The one that is most surely asking us not, what do you need to run from, but what do you want to run toward? Anyway, just for those who are following the curriculum, in the early part of the month, what I put up with these spiritual exercises, and the first exercise was 40 days of pursuit, and it had a wonderful quote, which you can find on the page, that kind of just was there to remind folk that there is this wisdom and this journey, and if we can get some stuff out of the way, we can actually journey, have a spiritual journey. And so, check that out on the page if you're interested. And then there was another option, which was called Find Care Freedom, and an awesome video. And, really asking folks to reflect and take a look and identify some of the ways that we are not free. Then there were also some wonderful songs and videos. And then lastly, there was an option for folks to sort of make up their own thing. Anyway, I can't recall if I had listed any questions, but it had a slew of questions. And I think for folks that tune in, I think it would be beneficial if we could just sort of quickly reflect on these questions for our own lives. So I'll try to run through this pretty quickly because I don't want this to be like a 3-hour Omo House message. But these were the questions that were posed around the concept of freedom. And, you know, maybe pick one or two that might apply to your life, or maybe you've been reflecting on this the whole month. But really good stuff. So question number 1. Are you trapped in a story about yourself or others? What would happen if you put your story on the shelf and tried to live out an alternative story just for a month? Number 2, have you trapped someone in a story of your making? Number 3, has freedom for you been in one big leap or a slow and steady process? Number 4, have you trapped yourself in a woundedness and victimhood? You know, and as an aside, I think those stories of woundedness and victimhood are huge. And there was this one quote that was connected to that question by Eckhart Tolle that says, as long as you make an identity for yourself out of pain, you cannot be free of it. Awesome. Question number 5. Are you trapped in the escape from pain? And this one was cool, right? Because, you know, what the text acknowledges is that all people have pain and, you know, people want to escape that. But that sometimes the effort to escape becomes a poison of its own. So, yeah, kind of deep, like a cycle, right? Number 6. Is guilt your unnecessary and unaffordable prison? And powerful quote by Audre Lorde connected to this question that says, I have no creative use for guilt, yours or my own. Guilt is only another way of avoiding informed action, of buying time out of the pressing need to make clear choices, out of the approaching storm that can feed the earth as well as bend the trees. Question number 7, how might quitting be an act of freedom for you? And nice subpoint. Sometimes the greatest freedom comes from finally letting go, being willing to say enough, or being brave enough to walk away. Question 8, in the world's or your own definition of beauty leaving you trapped? So is the world or your own definition of beauty leaving you trapped? Number 9, has aging offered you a freedom you've not yet noticed, right? That maturity piece. Number 10, are you trapped by your inability to forgive? Number 11, are you afraid of freedom? And then, of course, make up your own question. Anyway, those were the questions that were posed around freedom. I thought really huge. I then think that at the beginning of the month, I threw out some of those really awesome quotes. Because I can remember freedom from expectation quotes, freedom from negative emotions quote, freedom from suffering quotes, freedom beyond boundaries, and freedom for others. So like I said, you know, roll up to the front. Oh, yeah, freedom from success and stuff. So, yeah, roll up to the beginning of the month and you'll see a whole bunch of questions, exercises, quotes. And, yeah, so I don't think that I will do next month the same way, but I'm having the freedom to explore different ways of using this material, which is known as FaithWorks. So feel free to journey with us in whatever way that works for you. And I think that's the biggest thing that I got out of this freedom piece is, unleashing my story, or getting out of the prison of my story about what Omo House has to look like and what does it mean to be an effective spiritual leader, and how often do you talk? These are all stories, right? Like, if I talk every week, I'm a good spiritual leader. Or if I don't talk at all, am I not? So, really, I got a lot of freedom from utilizing the material early on, and I know I will continue to marinate on it and grow in it. And so I'm exploring this just as deeply as the rest of the community. So peace, love, and light, and I look forward to coming up with some creative way of sharing next month's conversation, which, if I may say so myself, is very, very, very powerful. So in the meantime, in between time, may you all be blessed, and may you all find your freedom. Peace.